Okay, so let's have a look at how this workflow functions. So the idea is that we take in a safe work method statement document, either a PDF or a DOCX file, and we make an assessment and provide feedback on whether it meets the requirements of the head contractor. And so an SWMS, a SWMS file, they look like a risk assessment file, right? So they have information about the hazards and how they're going to deal with them and things like that. It's a pretty standard business document for particularly really any business in Australia that has like a hazardous workplace. So I've built this workflow in N8N partly because it makes it really easy to demonstrate what's going on. It's not just code. And also it's a very flexible way of manipulating what's a complicated process. So I'm going to give you a step through this in a moment, but first we'll just have a look at the front end so we can have a quick understanding of like what the user experience is like. So this is just a standalone page as an example. So put in your name, email address, and company, and then attach a file. And so this needs to be like a document, like a PDF or a Word document. So then we click Generate Report. This timing takes about 1 to 2 minutes, depending on the size of the file. It's a fairly complicated set of processes it goes through, and it's running like the main query runs Gemini Pro. So that's doing that now, and I'll start to explain what's happening on the back end. So what's happening now, it's inserting the information into the webhook, which is just a kind of endpoint for the code, right? Then we take the file name and we tidy it up. So we make it not have like weird characters and stuff, just so we don't get any kind of errors on the way through. And then we summarize the input fields. So we make sure that we've got, the email and name and things like that. And then the file gets uploaded to a Cloudflare R2 bucket, which is like an S3 compatible. So I think, just a place on an account we can store files in. So the next step is we need to decide, like, is it a PDF or a DOCX file? Because Google Gemini, happily, you can analyze a PDF. You cannot analyze a DOCX file. And that report's finished, and I'll come back to that, but let's have a look through the workflow some more. So if it's a PDF, we get straight to the next step, which just brings the path back together. So it's ready to check if it's a SWMS file. If it's not, then we get the file name, we send it off to a PDF conversion service, get the file back, and then we store that converted file back into the storage bucket. So now we know we've got a PDF, and we know the name of the PDF as well, whether it was the original or a new one we made. So following from that, we want to check, like, is this actually a SWMS file? Like, because someone could have uploaded something else by mistake. And so the agent here is making a determination, like, is this file, does it look like a SWMS file? Does it have something about safe work method statement, hazard notification, etc.? And you can see the prompt basically is like an output of true or false and a reason. So the agent, it reads in the file. So we're using the document understanding component of Gemini, and it makes a decision that JSON parser just tidies things, like the output, to work nicely for N8N. And then if it is a SWMS file, we're going to go and do some more things. If it's not, we're going to send the user an email and return a response that's basically says, like, it seems like you've made a mistake and this isn't a SWMS file. If it does look like a SWMS file, this is where we do the much more interesting prompt. And so what's happening here is we've got the file being read, which is the one that we provided from the form. We've got the review document, which is it's a document that is like a normal checklist that you would use if you were a person. And we've got the prompt. Now, this is quite a lot in here, but I'll just kind of touch on some key things. So, you know, we've got the role and the situation. So we're telling the agent, you know, what's going on. And then we have the process for it to follow. And it's a very deliberately strict process because we want it to just look at this document, compare it to the assessment criteria, and then provide a very definite output. And that output is a markdown, like a sort of basically formatted answer, and also a full HTML page, like the full answer to the question. And then the rest of the prompt basically is explaining what that looks like. And so you can see here we've got the structure for the markdown, which is like all of the criteria and information. That's an example for it to follow. And then we've got the example for the HTML page. And again, this is all like stuff like the styling of the page, the color, all that sort of thing. And so what actually happens is this is generated each time on the fly. Like there's not a thing in here, we're storing anything in a database. Like we give the SWMS file to Gemini, we tell it this is the output we want and the criteria to decide what goes into it, and it generates the whole file. Right, so it's really quite different to the way you would normally like create a web page because it is being rendered by the AI. And so then once we've got that, we've got to do a little bit of tidy up. So we get rid of the PDFs and potentially DOCX because we don't want to keep those files. We take the markdown, turn it into some HTML, and we send a summary to their email just to make sure they've got a copy in their email. And we output a nice version to the webhook, right? So it goes back to the original website they made the question on, and that will present in a way it looks like a web page. So that's what happens. Okay, so if I just step back out for a moment, we might just start this again so that we can see from the beginning. So name, email, JSWeb, and just make sure do we make any changes? I might just save that. I think that's all okay. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so choose file, and then we're going to generate the report. So this process, if I go back to one of the previous executions, so it's running now. If I go back to the previous one, and we should see, you can see kind of like the pathway it took here, where the information comes in, and then we're grabbing information from the form and the file and all that kind of stuff. So that's what's going on like in the background, right? So it's processing it. So it's roughly towards the end of the workflow now, where it's probably generating the HTML output. And everybody just has to be patient because it's a complex task using Google Gemini 2.5 Pro. Okay, so it's done. So we go and look at our SWMS report, and you can see this is a report that follows the template pattern, but it's all generated on the fly, right? So this isn't like a HTML that's had answers injected into it, right? It's not a typical way you would build a web page. It's actually created from scratch using the template each time by the AI, which is really cool. Obviously, like if you can't imagine doing this as like a browsery web page, but if you use a simpler workflow, you can certainly do this kind of thing on the fly without a standard way of making a web page. So that's it. That's the answer to, is this a good SWMS document? And I say in the background, you can see like this workflow ran quite nicely, and followed it all the way through to completion. And so that's the idea of like a workflow that's agentic, because we've got these Gemini agents that are doing some work for us. So yeah,